Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. Paranormal or not, what is the scariest or most unsettling experience you've ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 13, I experienced the ghost of my grandmother. She died in her sleep while taking a nap in the living room couch. Afterwards, according to my father and grandfather, every now and then they could hear her make the trip from the bedroom to the kitchen and open the refrigerator door, a trip she made many times when she was alive. At first I thought my father and grandfather were making this up, having fun at my expense. A couple of years after she passed, my father and I went to spend the weekend with my grandfather. My father and I slept on the living room couch. It opened into a double bed, the same couch that my grandmother died on. My grandfather left the house to go to a neighbor's house to play poker. My father and I went to bed in the living room. My father went right to sleep. I laid awake reading a magazine. After a while, I heard the noise of the back bedroom door being pulled open. I heard the sound of shuffling feet. I heard the creak in the floor directly in front of the bathroom doorway. I heard more shuffling feet. Then I heard the fridge door being pulled open, and I heard the sound of glass bottles in the fridge door clinking against each other. Back then, they were still putting soft drinks in glass bottles. Feeling thirsty, I decided to get out of bed and go join my grandfather in the kitchen for a cold drink. I go into the kitchen only to find myself all alone. I was puzzled. I could have sworn I heard my grandfather walk from the bedroom into the kitchen and open the fridge. Then I remembered that my grandfather wasn't home. He was over the neighbor's house, and he hadn't come back yet. Then I remember my grandfather and father's ghost stories. Then I got scared. I raced from the kitchen into the living room and leapt over my sleeping father into my side of the bed. Then I went to sleep. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up with a start, a feeling of paralyzing fear in my body. I was frozen. I was lying on my right side. It took a while for me to work up the courage to turn my head to the left. My head was covered by my blanket. There was a shadow being cast onto the blanket. The shadow was the outline of a head and shoulders of a woman with a beehive hairdo. My grandmother used to always have a beehive hairdo, even years after it went out of style up until she died. I heard heavy breathing coming from the shadow. I had to work up the courage to move one of my hands to remove the blanket off of my face. When I did, in an instant, the paralyzing fear I felt was gone. The shadow was gone. The sound of heavy breathing was gone. My father was still sleeping. I pulled the blanket back over my head and went back to sleep, only to wake up again on my right side. The paralyzing fear was back, forcing myself to turn my head. The shadow was back. The heavy breathing was back. Again, I had to summon up all my courage to move my hand to take my blanket off my face, only to find nothing there and the paralyzing fear gone. I went through the same routine the entire night. I lost count of how many times this happened through the night, maybe a dozen, maybe more, but it happened a lot. The next morning, I told my father what happened to me throughout the entire night while we slept. The sound of the bedroom door opening, the shuffling feet, the fridge door opening, nobody in the kitchen, being awakened with a paralyzing fear, the shadow, the heavy breathing, the repeat performances throughout the night. I kind of expected him to tell me that I was just seeing and hearing things, but instead he smiled and exclaimed, "That was Grandma." It happened last night. I picked up a nasty cold last week visiting Boston. I've been all coffee and phlegmy and mucusy and gross. Sleeping is obviously difficult. My spouse says that I coughed for hours when I thought I had been soundly asleep, so I'm sleeping in the other room. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night, completely unable to breathe. Not like my nose is stuffed up, breathing is difficult, but I'm literally choking and zero air is moving through my body and my brain is beginning to starve for oxygen. My guess is I rolled onto my back and my respiratory system got blocked with mucus or something. I stood up and still couldn't breathe. I ran to the main bedroom and dropped onto all fours, and still not a single molecule of air was moving into or out of my body. I'm there for what felt like an eternity. like I'm underwater or someone is strangling me, completely incapable of taking a single breath. Finally, after probably 45 seconds, the phlegm or whatever moves just a little bit, and I'm able to draw in a tiny amount of air and begin coughing. I was in full-on tears and thought I was going to die right there. All I could think about was my dear childhood friend who passed away last year in his sleep in what seemed like a simple flu at the age of only 37, and that I was about to follow him from a stupid cold. I can't imagine what would have happened if I had been 60 or 80 or whatever and had that experience, or maybe even just unhealthy from lifestyle or some other disease. I might not have been able to write this post this morning. Not so much scary, but kind of crazy, and something I cannot explain or understand. In high school, I had a friend, we'll call him John for these purposes. Me and John played football together, and we would always get extra lifting sessions in at the high school gym. We remained friends after high school and even worked together for a bit. He ended up getting into selling pills, and our relationship deteriorated to the point where we were no longer speaking. Fast forward a few years later, and I have this dream. In my dream, I'm back at my high school gym, lifting weights with John. We were just chatting about random stuff, having a good time, and then he suddenly said that he had to go. I tell him I don't want him to leave because I want to keep hanging out, and I missed him. He just says he's really sorry, but he has to leave. I say, okay, see you later. And he replies with a nod and a see you later. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I see it, and it's my mom, and I answer it. She tells me that John had died last night and asking if I'm okay and other mom stuff. She had heard from John's mom, who called in saying that John's siblings would not be at school the rest of the week because of his death. My mom was a secretary at the school they went to. I can't help but think that something paranormal had happened to allow me to make peace with and say goodbye to my friend and have some bit of closure. He was 25 when he died of an overdose, and he was the first person really close to me who had died. My friend died in a car accident, and they towed the car pretty early in the day. We were teens, so we thought we should go collect all her things that were ejected from the car when she hit the tree. After about half an hour, I was overwhelmed and just sat down and started crying. I had my two friends with me cleaning stuff up, and they just let me get it out for a bit. Someone started rubbing my shoulders in the deepest massage I've ever had, and it was really helping me get control of myself and relaxing me. I let them rub for a few minutes, and then I put my hand on theirs to let them know I was appreciative. There was no hand, just my shoulder. I turned around to say thank you to whoever it was, and there was nobody. I looked up at the car, and my two friends were standing there talking about something. Something had been tossing me. I ran to the car and asked my friends if it was them. They looked at me like I was crazy. I made everyone get in the car super fast and we left. I think a spirit was comforting me in my loss, and I'm grateful and freaked out for it. I can still remember how it felt, and it's been 22 years. When I was a teenager, I worked at a cable access studio and made mini movies. My neighbors gave me their father's old video camera. They told me he never used it, but it didn't seem to work anymore and had tape jammed in it. I fixed it up, and on the tape were hours of him driving around at night and filming people through their windows. Nothing overly sexual was on it, but there is something unsettling about seeing people and peeping Tom footage of a guy eating dinner with his family, or over 20 minutes of some girls dancing around in their room. As a time capsule, something like that found footage is pretty cool, but the act is extremely creepy. Yeah. One day, my friend and I decided to go camping at a hot spring that was closed due to a recent fire. We arrived there and set up our tent. It was about 8 p.m. We stripped completely naked and went up to the hot spring. I brought a machete and a bag of goldfish. We had to climb up to it, and the only way to go down was to go back the slippery way we came. We hung there for about 2.5 hours when a flashlight came on from above our heads. There was someone right above us. Keep in mind that it's 10:30 at a closed down site when it's pitch black. So we're in the worst possible position, wet, naked, cold, alone, and dark, and all we have is a machete and a bag of goldfish. Well, this person walks around the area for about 45 minutes with a flashlight before it suddenly stops. My friend and I still decide to stay there for a bit, and now it is 1. Then we run out when it's 30 degrees, so we're shivering cold. We get our pants and unlaced shoes on. He packs up our tent while I walk around with a machete on watch. Then we began to run through the black burnt forest, and since we were so scared, we thought that everything was something. I thought the wind was a distant laugh or a branch was a face. But eventually we made it back to the car after an hour of traversing the forest. A week later on the news, a dead body was found in the river nearby. I was on a small base in Afghanistan in 2003, just outside of Kabul, right before you got into the mountains heading toward Pakistan. It was an Al-Qaeda camp before we bombed the shit out of it and took it over. We established an OP guard tower on the roof of one of the buildings that was still standing. It was about 5 stories and nothing but concrete. No windows, no doors, though there were spaces where there once were, and debris that made it look like it may have been an office building or hasty medical facility. Then you go into the bathrooms, dried blood everywhere, clogging the drains on the floor and the urinals and the toilets, bloody handprints and splatters on the wall. The blood had even pooled on the floor due to clogged drains and hardened in place. This was every bathroom in the building. They were clearly used to slaughter people. At night, if you sat and listened, you would start to hear crying. I don't believe in God and afterlife or anything, really, that you can't provide concrete proof of. I heard that shit, and I can't explain it other than to say I had heard stories of it from people and gave it a try. So maybe it was all in my head. I sat on the stairs, middle of the building, maybe 3rd or 4th floor, and didn't hear anything for a while. Started thinking it was bullshit. Then I started to hear it. I thought maybe I was being effed with, so I decided to go left and start looking. It wasn't a very complex building. A few big rooms on either side that were sparsely scattered with debris. Easy to see they were empty. No one in the bathrooms. I stopped to hone in on the sound. It's coming from the other end of the building. Still, could be someone messing with me, so I head over there for a look. Same thing. Nothing. I listen again, and it's back to coming from the opposite side of the building. I decided at that point that, real or joke, I'm out. Everyone heard it. We all eventually just ignored it. Could have been the wind, the pipes, or lots of other things. Still was creepy at the time. Strange occurrences seem to have followed me my entire life. From time to time things happen, and I can't quite explain them. Here are some examples. An old girlfriend and I were living in a basement apartment in the house that was 100+ years old. Our kitchen or dining room area had a little eating space in the form of a bar along the wall where she had propped up 2 framed photo collages she'd made of herself and friends. During a particularly heated discussion one night, one of them went off the counter where it stood and smashed it on the floor a few feet out. We thought perhaps it had fallen off until we saw the other take off with some force. It went through the air about 4 feet and smashed against a bookshelf. Neither of us could come up with a fitting explanation. In the same apartment a few months later, I was sitting on the couch reading at home alone. The entrance to the home had a small area where you came in the door with a set of steps up to the main house and a set down to our space. On the wall, there were some hooks with some brooms and such hanging from them. As I sat there in silence, our dog started barking up the stairs toward the landing. I called her over, and she came to lay with me on the couch. A moment or two later, one of the brooms came flying down the stairs as if it were being thrown. To get the broom off the hook, you would have to pull it out until it's horizontal and lift it up. Again, I could come up with no reasonable explanation, and I was the only one in the house apart from the dog next to me on the couch. I lived nearby a friend's grandparents' home, and he would stay with them often. Naturally, I would also stay rather often, but that house was unusual. Perhaps most unnerving was in the room I stayed there was a mirror that faced out into the hallway. The whole way down, when laying in the bed, you could see what appeared to be shadows occasionally moving up and down the hallway in the reflection. If you looked down the hallway itself, no such thing could be seen. Lastly, for now, just 2 days ago, in the apartment my wife and I shared, she was standing in the washroom, and I stood in the doorway talking to her. The kitchen is immediately behind me, and as we spoke, the ceiling light fixture that hadn't been touched since I replaced a bulb a month or two ago suddenly came off and exploded, sending glass everywhere. Perhaps the threading in the screw holding it in place had let go, but that doesn't explain the various utensils that had been on the counter a few feet away that were now lying on the floor. There have been many other strange experiences in my life, but I still don't truly believe in the supernatural. Oddly enough, I assume there are explanations for all these things. I'm quite possibly just too dumb to figure them out. DL, DR. Shit just breaks around me sometimes for no reason.